Are the central banks around the world on this path that they're on? Are they going to get off this path, or are they going to continue toward their inflationary policies, in your view?
Well, I think the very reason for them to come into existence was to inflate, to make it possible for governments to spend much more money than they would ever have in terms of taxes. So yes, they will keep inflating as long as we, the population, allows them to do so. Though without a grassroots-based real opposition movement, I just can't see who should stop them from inflating, because our politicians obviously also see the inflation as the easier way to go. It's easier to sell the voter an inflationary episode than a crisis. If you want to buy your voters, you better do it by using the printing press. So I think these relations make a strong argument for further inflationary policies here.
Yeah, you're really showing some very good insight in terms of the problem here, in the sense that the system was created to favor politicians because they need, for power and for favors, they need to spend money. And the gold standard actually acted as a brake or a discipline on how much money they could spend, whereas in this present system, they can just create money out of thin air and spend whatever they want until ultimately the currency is destroyed. Is that likely what's going to happen to some of these currencies if central banks don't change their ways?
Yes, definitely. That's the end point of these policies. If you don't stop, if you just keep going and going and going, you finally destroy the currency. That's, Ludwig von Mises, the most influential and maybe most famous of the Austrian economics writers, made this point very, very clear nearly 90 years ago. And he's right in doing so. And he was experienced, he was seeing what was going on then in Germany and also in Austria during the 1920s, hyperinflation. So he has seen it already all, and he understood how the mechanisms did work. So yes, if we don't put on the brakes, finally the currency will be destroyed. And this can actually start relatively quickly as soon as confidence evaporates. So it's also a confidence game which is being played here. And as soon as people stop buying treasury bonds, we will have a funding crisis with massively rising interest rates. And as soon as confidence in the currency disappears, well, we will immediately have drastically higher inflation rates, because then the velocity of money will quickly start to jump. And then that's the inflationary endgame.
That's the Mises crackup boom, as he called it.
That's exactly the crackup boom, yes.
I was just recently in the States, and while I was there, I was speaking at a monetary conference, and they announced the financial results of the federal government for the month of April. It's first 7 months of the current fiscal year through April. And the amount of debt that they increased was $870 billion over 7 months. Yep. And the thing that for me was very alarming and shocking is that of every $100 they spend, 40% comes from borrowed money, only 60% comes from revenue. And when you get that kind of percentage, you're basically very, very close to a hyperinflationary blow-off or beginning of the crackup boom. And one of the things that you mentioned was that if they stop buying treasuries, hasn't that already happened? Because the government is spending so much money forcing them to borrow, and they're borrowing more than the market is willing to lend, which means that the Federal Reserve is coming in and creating those dollars out of thin air and giving them to the government for spending. So are we pretty close to the crackup boom?
We are, in my opinion, pretty close to a funding crisis. Because that's exactly what you described here, that the bond markets are showing already signs of stress.
Yes.
The Fed has come in with this quantitative easing 2 program, buying 600 billion. And well, actually, the original goal of this QE2 was to manipulate longer-term interest rates lower. Well, actually, what we have here now is longer-term interest rates roughly 1 percentage point higher than before QE2. So Bernanke may argue as he will, but QE2 actually flopped when measured against the original goal.
Yeah, understood. And one could argue that even though the Federal Reserve is buying treasuries, the fact that treasuries are higher is an indication that the market is not reacting well, to this whole policy.